I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the Coeur d'Alene School District 271 Board Meeting of August 2nd, 2021. Will the gentlemen please remove their hats and everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Yeah, I think so. It's on. You're still on to replace that. Public comment on district-related items is scheduled near the start of this meeting. I'd like to introduce our participants for this evening. Starting at my far right, Ms. Lynn Town, Clerk of the Board, Dr. Sean Hucker, Superintendent.
Sorry, can you guys turn up the mic? We can't hear you.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. Is it louder now? How are they in the back?
I think it's hard to draw out the hallway because there's, I guess, not enough room for the meeting.
Yeah, this meeting is being live streamed if you would like to watch it on live stream. So feel free if that's what you would like to do as well. So hopefully, is that better? Is that better? All right, let's go ahead and we'll start again. All right. Ms. Lynn Town, Clerk of the Board, Dr. Sean Hawker, Superintendent. Jen Brumley will be here later. She is coming straight from work and will be joining us soon. At my far left, Mr. Casey Morrisroe, Board Member. Mrs. Lisa May, Board Member. Mrs. Tambra Pickford is absent this evening, and I am Rebecca Smith, Vice Chair. Public comment on district-related items is scheduled near the start of this meeting. Please sign in on the sheet provided at the entrance door. Because of the diversity of issues, members of the board will not respond to public comment made during tonight's meeting. Instead, issues may be recorded and referred to the proper staff person for follow-up. Comments may also be submitted to the board by email at trustees@coeurdalenschools.org or in writing through the clerk. Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there any board trustee comments for this evening? None submitted. Then we'll move to public comment. We have a number of folks here tonight for public comment. I do have some things that I'm going to read first, and just as a reminder to all of us, and then we'll go through public comment one at a time. I want to remind the public that while this is a meeting of the Board of Trustees that takes place in public, it is not a meeting with the public. It is a meeting of the board to conduct district business. The board does allow some limited public comment on district-related items. Those wishing to address the board during this public comment period are limited to one comment not to exceed 3 minutes. At the designated time, you will be called to the podium. Please state your name and address or your city of residence. If you have additional comments that you would like to be presented to the board, you may provide those comments in writing to the clerk of the board, who will ensure that the board members receive this additional commentary. Please keep in mind that the board members will not respond to public comment. If I determine that an individual statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, or repetitive, I may terminate the speaker's privilege to address the board. We do have a number of folks tonight, so I will be keeping us to 3 minutes per comment this evening. I'd like to welcome Troy McCollum over here to give comment.
Good evening. Well, here we are again. I hadn't really planned on speaking tonight, making any comments, but with one of the items on the docket tonight being later on your discussion of equity framework, I felt I needed to say something. Again, the equity framework as written, as discussed already on numerous meetings going back to even last year, from the board, from the staff, from administration, is all pretty much telling us here as a community that you're going to use equity as a means to weave your framework into all curriculum throughout the year in all of the grades, K through 12. I think this is not a good idea at all. I ask you again to set it aside and just get rid of it. K through 5 shouldn't even be touching this. It's like a third rail. They're too young. Their minds haven't come of age yet to where they can take on some of the concepts that you're bringing to them, and you're bringing it to them through social and emotional learning. It's psychological learning, and what you're actually doing is indoctrinating the kids at such an early age. You can say you're not, you can write that you're not, but you know you are. The kids are not ready for this, okay? The tenets of what you're bringing to light and to the table within the curriculum are nothing more than tenets of critical race theory. We all know that that is a theoretical, academic program that's been taught in the upper grades in universities for a number of years. It's been going on since the 80s as critical race theory. It's been going on since the late 1800s and early 1900s as what we used to know as critical theory based on Karl Marx and his tenets of how to pit one group against the other. It used to be financial. Now it's racial. It works, but it's not a good thing. It doesn't work for us. It works against us. Student against student, community member against community member, parent against parent. It's just not good. It's invasive, it's divisive, and it's insidious. So I please ask you, once again, if you haven't already considered, please drop equity framework. Your content of Portrait of a Graduate could be good, but by weaving social, emotional learning, equity framework, diversity, equity, inclusion into this, it's not going to work. It will end well for the kids. And as you've seen over the last year with all the lockdowns, the masks, the confusion about vaccinations, et cetera, being brought into and throughout the schools, the kids are already confused. We have an epidemic in this country right now within the student population. It's called suicide. The kids are stressed. Their anxiety levels are over the top. And what you're doing by bringing equity to the school and through each and every class and each subject and each grade
And Mr.
is
Collier,
despicable.
will you
That's
wrap
all
it
I
up?
have to say.
Thank you. Ben Prickett? Okay, thank you. Bonnie Gunsier? And forgive me if I didn't say your name right. Bonnie? Okay, thank you. And Don Atrium?
I won't speak on that because he just addressed everything that I wanted to say as well. So I wanted to
And could you just reintroduce yourself and where
Don
you're from?
Antrim.
Thank you.
And I've got 3 kids at the school district, a senior at Lake City, a sophomore at Lake City, and a 6th grader at Woodland. I also worked at Woodland, and I had to quit last fall because of the mask mandate. And my youngest son, has a heart condition, and I had to pull him out of school because he could not wear a mask or he'd pass out. His doctor would not give him an exemption because Kootenai Health told them that they could not write exemptions to them. So I had to quit the job that I loved for the district that I loved to homeschool my son, which I thought was completely backwards. So I'm asking that you guys will leave the masks up to the parents. The science is too skewed. It's up and it's down. There's working at Woodland. I would come up in the morning with 3 or 4 busloads of kids waiting for the doors to open, masked up, and not one kid talking to each other. Not one. They would stand there like this, looking, not messing around, not playing. You get into the classroom, you couldn't get them to talk, you couldn't get them to participate, you couldn't get them involved at all. They were depressed. My daughter wanted to quit school. She's a straight A student at Lake City. She wanted to quit. She hated it. She says, we can't, it's just different. It's just oppressive. So I'm just asking that as the media pushes their fear-mongering again, that you leave the masks up to the parents. And like the gentleman said, let's think about their mental health this year and not the masks that aren't even working. Most of us have had COVID. We're fine. The ones that didn't, I'm sorry, just like any other disease, it's going to happen. But most of us have had it or they're vaccinated. So leave it up to the parents as the fear-mongering starts, the new Delta variant or whatever variant they come up with next throughout the year, and let our kids go to school and learn without any agendas. Thanks.
Ann Seddon? Ann?
And said, there are just too many things I want to say. So I'm going to address this to you and also...
And where are you from?
Pardon?
Where are you from? Where are you from?
Oh, I'm sorry. I am from Coeur d'Alene.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to address this to the board and also hope parents are listening. Parents and community want transparency, and they also want honesty about the equity framework and portrait of the graduate. First of all, as far as transparency, it used to be I could go onto the website, type in the search bar, equity framework, and it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't come up for me now. So I had to go through 4 layers, 3 or 4 layers to find it. Portrait of the graduate is put out there right in front, and that's the gloss part. The nitty-gritty is the framework, and that should be up on the front. Second of all, I believe we need transparency in truly knowing how much you've already spent on this. I understand you've already sent people back to Denver. I mean, these big pamphlets. I can't imagine. And I can't imagine if that's where our levy money went. Next, and I noticed that emergency levy is on the agenda tonight. The other thing is transparency on who wrote it. Was this one individual? Was this from a consulting firm? Was this a group? I'm sorry, Lisa May. I didn't know if you were... Okay, thank you. So I do not know, we don't really know who wrote that, or truly wrote that, so that would be good for you to inform us. We know about the collaborative effort supposedly on the portrait of the graduate, but this is a little different. And next, I think the parents need to find out the transparency of can they opt out of the assessment. I think that's perhaps the most dangerous part. In the framework, there is talk of seeking out biases of yourself, and that these, and also evaluation of children's social emotional growth. And there have been references about this going into their permanent records. And during one meeting, I said, oh, it's not a worry because it goes down to the state and aggregate form. But wait, if it's in their student record, this can really damage a student because these are all subjective things that are being put into records. And we do not have any idea of who it would be going to. Plus, those records are looked at by all their teachers. So a teacher might, there might be a record on, quote, their development in freshman year, so their sophomore teachers get to look at it, and then they have a built-in prejudice about that student. So I think all of these things need to be very transparent, and I think the parents need to know whether they can opt out. In fact, I strongly suggest you have an opt-in form for students to be assessed on such sensitive information. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Sean Holm?
Hi, Sean Holm, City of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I'm a proud father of 2 children that attend Coeur d'Alene School District 271. Both of my daughters are emblematic of what it is to be a student in our school district. In addition to their regular studies, one of my daughters loves to play sports and recently found theater, and the other loves to play the trumpet, to which she is getting the hang of, bless her heart. This is why I was so shocked to find that our school district has fallen prey to tenets often found in critical race theory that undermine the objectives outlined in subsection 1 of House Bill 377 that exacerbate and inflame divisions on the basis of sex, race, ethnicity, religion, color, national origin, and other criteria in ways that are contrary to the unity of the nation and the well-being of the state of Idaho and its citizens. How? With the adoption of the massively flawed Portrait of a Graduate, which is being used to import these banned objectives and institute an agenda that runs afoul of state law. It is being used to direct our local schools at curricula based on a national think tank's socialist construct. Now that I have the board's full attention and hopefully the parents of this district, I just made some serious accusations, ones that carry weight of state law, and naturally the question becomes, where's the proof? Fortunately, this was the easy part. As a family of 2 breadwinners, time is not on our side. This is why I was elated to find that it only took 1 day to unravel this illegal activity, as sunshine is the best disinfectant. And in times like these, that holds true in more ways than one. The school district claims on its own website unequivocally that this plan was generated locally, and I quote, from the ideas and values of our community. What happens when you bring together a diverse group of people who care deeply about the quality and education in our community and ask them to brainstorm the skills, knowledge, and character traits we want our students to have upon graduation? We found out during a series of public workshops and listening sessions when we invited the community to brainstorm with us on how to build a portrait of a graduate. I won't read all of that. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. All these locals work together in a grassroots fashion to create this word salad called Portrait of a Graduate, right? Not so fast. This is where this dad decided to employ my own critical thinking skills and made a quick internet search which revealed that there is a website called portraitofagraduate.org. Interesting. I wanted to learn more. So I encourage everyone in attendance and watching from afar to join in now. Go to portraitofagraduate.org and follow along. You'll find that this Columbus, Ohio nonprofit 501c3 provides the framework, advocacy, language, and mentorship to institute your very own socialistic wholesale takeover of your school's power structure and curriculum by installing a quote-unquote customized plan for your school district. But it gets worse, way worse. Now look at the unsuspecting logo on that Portrait of Graduate website, and you will see some extra words. Wait, what is Battelle for Kids, you ask? The logo clearly states Portrait of a Graduate by Battelle for Kids. And here is where I blow the lid off this conspiracy, and it is a conspiracy. I'd like the parents of this district to search for Battelle for Kids, that's BATTELLE for kids.org, and click on the link that goes to their website. Now click on About Us button, and we will learn more about this 501c3 that is creating and directing the curricula of Coeur d'Alene School District 271 directly from their website, About Us. Battelle Kids is a national, non-for-profit organization with the mission of realizing the power and promise of 21st century learning for every student. Let me read that again. Battelle for Kids is a national nonprofit organization with the mission of realizing the power, not for the student. They're realizing their own power.
And Mr. Holm, I'm going to need you to bring it to a close. You're at 4 minutes.
I'm at 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Guess that's equity and inclusion. All right, so Battelle for Kids believes education is the critical foundation for the cultivating, promoting, and accelerating equity and inclusivity for society. We have a responsibility to advance deeper 21st century for every student everywhere, resulting in high-quality, equitable experiences and outcomes. Therefore, Battelle for Kids intentionally prioritizes diversity, equity, and inclusion in all aspects of our work with school systems and partners. I'll try to make it as fast as possible.
And yeah, I'm going to need you to bring it to a close, please.
Do not allow nonprofit, out-of-state, 501c3 companies to dictate our children's education. Do not sublet your duties and responsibilities to a consortium of illegitimate entities and consultants that have predetermined outcomes to shape the way we teach our children. Equality is paramount. Equity is a perpetual division that serves to generate strife. If pre-manufactured solutions worked, the world would be a utopia already. You are better than this. We are better than this. Thank you.
Gretchen Lawrence.
My name is Gretchen Lawrence. I am from Hayden, Idaho. First and foremost, I want to say that we do have some great educators here in this district. I appreciate them so very much, and my gratitude to them is great. I know some parents have concerns on coming forward due to backlash from teachers and administrators, for we have seen this happen before. With that said, in watching the last board meeting on YouTube, I came away with so many questions. I do want to thank all who spoke up. I appreciate the woman from Seattle and her firsthand experience with damaging curriculum. I also am so thankful for the courageous woman who is an immigrant that lives in the district but has chosen to put her kids in private schools because of all the ... Going back over the email I got from Scott Mabin, and in it says, this district uses a clear and rigorous and transparent process for developing and adopting curriculum. In my dealings with the district, I have found this is not to be always true. My children's rights have been violated 2 times now that I know of, and one that is against school policy could be against their rights. And going to the district, I have found that they sweep things under the rug, hoping that the issues will dissolve. For the most part, they do. I have emails in corresponding with the district on these 3 matters. 2 of these matters, your children could have been impacted by them. There was no transparency. Questions. And I hope that I get an email, my email's on there, in response to these questions. Is there a public forum where parents can talk to each other about these issues? It'd be nice to see maybe a church or somewhere opening up for the parents to get together as a collective and talk intelligently, calmly about these issues. Does the district get funding for CRT curriculum? If so, how much is this funding? Is it integrated in all classes, or is it a separate class? Can I opt out? Can I view the full curriculum? Will it be in K through 12? My concern is, how is this going to affect all children with already rising suicide rate in our area and in our youth? Our area has had several tragedies over the past several years that has left us all speechless, has left our children with concerns, and how it's affect them personally. I do not want my child to have this curriculum. I am publicly opting out.
Jeremy Morris?
Hello, my name is Jeremy Morris. I'm an attorney, and I'm sure some of you have probably asked yourself, why is this attorney who sued us here tonight? He can't speak to us. He should be talking to our attorney. Well, I know we have a hearing on the 11th. It'll be interesting what happens. But I'm not actually here to talk about that lawsuit. I don't even know if that'd be ethical. Maybe you guys would have to consult your attorneys. I'm not really sure. But I'm actually here tonight to inform all of you that I'm actually suing you again. Oh yeah, that already is happening. Now here's why. Because what I've learned with dealing with you folks is this is not about being heard. This is not even about a negotiation. When I was trying to have conversation with you folks involving a First Amendment violation of taking a brigadier general and trying to have him arrested, removed from property, who was 100 feet from a building in accordance with state law, you said, well, this is our property. This is our school property, right? So I tried to, hey, if you guys could just issue an apology and we won't do this in the future. And so on and on your attorneys went. Round and round we went. But it turned out I wasn't really negotiating with anyone. You guys were talking to the state's attorney general. It was very, very interesting how you guys set that up. So here's what we're going to do. I'm not asking you to do anything regarding critical race theory. No, we're just suing you. And listen, whether or not the courts end up agreeing that you guys are in violation of House Bill 377, which I definitely think that you are, one way or another, you guys aren't going to get your way. And the reason is because if we don't win in court, we're just going to replace all of you in the next election. So at this time, I'd like to introduce one of my clients. Matt, would you stand up? Thank you. With your family, thank you very much. Thank you. This is Matt and his lovely wife. And then, is it Ben? Where'd Ben go? Ben is another plaintiff that will be suing you very shortly. You'll be getting that served on you. And I just want to say, it really comes home to me because I remember when my daughter, she was going into the 3rd grade in 2019. And real quick, I remember the 3rd grade was like my favorite year of school. I was so excited to learn all about the different parts of the caterpillar and the different insects. It's so cool. So I was excited to learn what my daughter's teacher would be, who that would be at Hayden Meadows. So I went down to that meet the teacher night, and I met that teacher. I said, well, how long have you been teaching? Oh, this is my first year. Really? It's your first year? Yeah. Well, what did you do before this? Well, I'm actually an attorney. I'm an attorney too. You're an attorney? Really? Well, do you work for a law firm I would know? No, I work, there's a justice project. Worked there for 10 years in Spokane. That triggered a little bell in my head. I moved aside, looked on my phone. Oh yeah, what was that project? Well, yeah, the teacher, the now 3rd grade teacher, is going to brainwash the children for the next 9 months. Yeah, she only wrote the about section that said all of history is viewed through the prism of race. And your district hired that individual to destroy my daughter's brain. And for that...
And Mr. Morris, you're at 4 minutes.
Thank
so
you,
if you
I'm
could
done.
bring it
Thank you. And for
together.
that...
Thank you.
For that, it's called righteous indignation. And guess what? I'm getting even.
Chris Meyer.
Wipe the smug look off your face. We'll resign now.
Thank you. We'll see you in court.
Good evening, Superintendent, members of the board. My name is Chris Meyer. I live here in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Number one, thank you for your tireless volunteer service on behalf of our district. This is an unpaid position. You volunteered for this opportunity, and you're getting a lot of input. So I'm here to offer a little bit of other input perhaps, but thank you for your service. We appreciate it. Dr. Hawker, welcome to our community. This is, we're glad to have you here with your experience and expertise. Our board and our district and our community, our world is facing unprecedented challenges that are unique in their complexity and their nuance. It's very difficult to boil down to sound bites because the framework is very dynamic. I'd like to talk a little bit about what the district is up against and maybe make some suggestions about how you might consider approaching some of these challenges. One way to look at this is that our job as a community and your job as a board and a district is to achieve basic proficiency for our K through 12 students. That gives them the basic skills of a whole wide variety of different opportunities. After that, many of our students out of our public district go on to pursue advanced degrees, whether it's a welding certificate, a pipe fitter certificate, or it could be a master's degree or even a medical degree, perhaps. Those folks have taken it upon themselves to become subject matter experts. They're not generalists, they're specific with deep knowledge about certain individual technical aspects. I think that's important. Everybody pursues their individual passions. So in many ways, when we have problems in our world, we look to those individual subject matter experts to help us out. My car is making a funny noise. I know enough to go see my mechanic because he's trained about what to do about that issue. If I have something where I don't feel well, I go see my doctor. Same thing goes when my air conditioning doesn't work. I'll call a trained subject matter expert to help me in that regard. So I'd like to encourage us as a community and as a board to be sure that we're giving the appropriate weight to the trained experts who have spent lives and careers trying to get themselves educated about individual subject matter. In particular, I'm thinking about the framework that we have to deal with here later in the program is going to be about our reopening plan. It is a very complicated and nuanced issue. The science is changing on a weekly, if not monthly basis, or even more rapidly. And it's a challenge. We've been fighting this as a community for a year now. We're going to continue to fight it for 2 more years as we work through a whole bunch of different dynamics that are unclear to us, and it's going to be a moving target. We have to do the best we can. So I know we all want to have our kids back in school as best we can, but trying to make that decision as a board of volunteers is an incredibly challenging prospect, and I'm very sympathetic for the challenges that you have to go through to decide that. But I would encourage you to think about listening to some of these trusted experts who have spent their life, every waking moment of every day, looking at these kinds of issues. People who are medical professionals, virologists, public health experts. People like that work here in our community as well, at Kootenai Health, at the Panhandle Health District, and even on a national level, the National Institutes of Health, the CDC, and the American Pediatric Association. So I would encourage you to put a heavy weight on the opinion of those experts. It's not your problem to solve. You have a very complex issue in front of you. So I would encourage us to abide by the guidance of those organizations whose sole mission it is to understand the science, try to keep us as a community abreast of that science, and make the best decisions we can for our kids. It's difficult. Nobody's going to be happy, but it's not your problem to solve. So we should take heed of those nationwide experts who can help guide us on what the best thing is to do to manage the safety and sanity of our children and the public health of our community. So thank you for the input. I wish you good luck in that process, and we'll be here along with you. Thank you.
Is it Cara? Claridge? There you are. It's with a K.
Well, hello, my name is Kara Claridge. I live in Coeur d'Alene, and I have 5 children. And I don't know what infuriates me more, the critical race theory or the mandated masks, but I'm just going to convey a little bit of my experience versus research. We did have to, as a family, remove our children from the charter school that they were in when they went back to mandated masks, contact tracing, and all the rest. Super disappointing, very depressing to look around and see kids in masks. So that was our experience there. We're doing, alternative schooling at this point. So I would encourage you not to go back to the mask mandates. Just let it be the choice of a parent. And as far as critical race theory, I would say that I experienced a conversation with a cousin last year, and I didn't know by name what he was talking about, but I felt so dirty that I was a white woman, and this is the kind of poison that they're putting on kids right now to drink. And I don't see anything redeeming in the critical race theory or anything by that same name or different name, same stuff. So I would also encourage that to be halted immediately, as I can see no good that it would serve for our children in this community. Thank you.
Matt Edwards?
No comment.
Okay, thank you. Duncan Kohler?
Fix that microphone so that we can hear.
There's no sound back here.
This one over here.
Is the light on?
So
Is-
folks, on these mics, you gotta be really close to them. If you could put them just underneath your
Is the
chin,
light on?
it'll work better.
Checking 1, 2, 3, 4. Hi, my name's Duncan Kohler. I'm from Coeur d'Alene. And I've been thinking about the relationship between the Board of Trustees and the public that you serve and how to characterize that. And the term fiduciary comes to mind. That's kind of a fancy term. It's a legal term, but it does apply to trustees. It applies, I went to the dictionary to check it out, even though I have an understanding. It says, someone like a trustee with a duty created by his or her undertaking. And you guys have undertaken to serve the public and your constituency and the kids derivatively. But by your undertaking to act for another's benefit. And the others here are the public, and then ultimately the kids. And the dictionary further says, it requires scrupulous good faith and candor by the fiduciary. And, by the way, it's applied to public officers like yourselves. Regardless, I think we can all agree that you have a moral fiduciary duty to our kids and to the public that you serve to look out for them, for their best interests. 13 years ago, this district brought the IB program basically under cover of darkness, and it kind of reminds me of what we have here. I know there were some discussions within the school district community about this program, but it really wasn't widely advertised, and some of us that don't plug in directly to what's going on with the school district really didn't know about it until recently. All of a sudden, it's here. Same thing happened with IB. There was no dialogue with the public before it was brought in about the goals and the goal to produce global citizens and agents for change of our society, which is a lot like what we've got now with this new program as far as the agents for change, the difference being that now we have the flavor of the month of racism added to the mix. By the way, the price tag for that program, which was a total failure, was about $2 million, and that doesn't count the attorney's fees that we all had to pay because of the trustees' failure in this regard. Now we've got the same thing. We've got the latest psychosocial education program presented to the public as a fait accompli. This is it. You guys are stuck with it. And who knows how much it's cost. Now, we've had some real good questions tonight asking for information, and I'm going to second that request. We want information. We want to know how much it costs. I understand the teachers have been sent to Denver quite a few times. That's expensive. The curriculum costs a certain amount of money. Apparently, you're dealing with NGOs, non-governmental organizations. So we need cost breakdown. We want to know whose idea this was. We want to know about the internal discussions of the board members about how to plan for the inevitable outcry from the public, because you've been through this drama once before with the IB program. So I know there's been some conversations. Email, texts, personal conversations, I don't know. But you've already heard tonight that there's going to be litigation,
And so I'm requesting right now that you preserve the evidence. Preserve those text messages. We want to find out what the conversation's been behind our backs. And lastly, I want an analysis. I don't want just a denial that this is the same, or this is not CRT, which we've heard in the press. I want some compare and contrast. I want some critical thinking. How is this the same as CRT? How is it different from CRT? There's got to be some differences, and there's got to be some similarities. It's obvious to anybody here tonight that there are similarities, great similarities. So we want candor, and it shouldn't have to be extracted from our elected board like it was last time through public records requests
And Mr. Kohler,
and
you're at 4
litigation
minutes.
discovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Megan Slauson.
Hello, I'm Megan Slauson. I live in Coeur d'Alene. I won't take up too much of your time. I'll be short and sweet, but boy, I've learned a lot tonight, and I'm sure everyone else has as well. And the word will spread. I just wanted to remind the Board of Trustees that an election is coming up. I find it interesting that the 3 trustee seats that are up for election have never faced a challenger. One seat was elected by default due to the lack of opposition, and the other 2 were appointed due to vacancies. As a parent and a member of this community, that just means that those 3 never really had to prove their worth when it comes to making decisions that affect our children and our community. This November, it will be very different. First, there will be challengers. And second, there is now a history of decision-making and voting by this board that can be pointed to, a track record of sorts. And especially in regards to the last year and a half, that track record has made an impact on the emotional, psychological, physical, and mental health and well-being of the children and young people in this community. And I can say that impact has not been a healthy one. In fact, I believe it to be downright destructive. And no one knows that impact better or more intimately than the parents and members of this community that will make sure to be at the ballot box in November. Thank you.
And Jacob Fleischer. Jacob?
Hi, thanks for hearing me. A year ago, I took a 90% pay cut at the urging of my son and his friends whom I...
Yeah, could you... Really close. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, better. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm tall. About a year ago, I took a 90% pay cut and became a substitute teacher at the urging of my son.
You tilt
What did Reagan
it,
say?
tilt it
Is
up,
this
and
thing
then...
on?
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
At the urging of my son, I became a teacher here, and it's the most rewarding work I've ever done. These are my observations. The kids are not reading. They're not reading books beyond a comic book or maybe a Hardy Boys mystery. They can't spell. They have a hard time with public speaking. And for the price of a Chromebook, we can buy 3 textbooks. Let's double their homework. Let's double their homework. Also, I've yet to enter a classroom that had a world map on the wall. These kids have no concept of geography or anything beyond Kootenai County, which is sad. And I've yet to be in a science classroom with a periodic table on the wall, but everybody's got a Chromebook. I'm a bit of a Luddite, I'm sorry. I think we need to get back to the basics. I think we need to teach these kids to read. I think we need to get them reading books, and I think we need to inspire their innate sense of curiosity so that they are able to educate themselves. I think we need to appeal to their sense of critical thinking so that they can read between the lines. And I think we need to get them educating themselves in between class. As far as CRT goes, it's incredibly toxic. If there's a psychologist out there that thinks that imbuing a child with guilt and shame for something they had nothing to do with, that's really sad. I've taught overseas, including communist countries, and I think it's really important for these kids to have a little bit of scope and to get their history, real history, not something that blows out of Washington, D.C., turns right at Boise. I've had a kid tell me that slavery was a uniquely American phenomenon and that it was only Europeans on Africans, which is absolutely false. I asked what they knew about Thomas Jefferson, and they said, oh, he was a slave owner, and that's all they knew. Somebody's dropping the ball here. And if we're sending these honor students, college-bound honor students out of here thinking that, Cicero's is a pizza parlor, Homer is Bart's dad, Machiavelli is a Ninja Turtle, and Sir Edmund Hillary is Hillary Clinton's dad, there's something wrong here. I'm not faulting my fellow teachers. They're very dedicated. What I'm faulting is whatever institutional constraints they're struggling with to try and straighten these kids out and elevate their minds and get them thinking and learning for themselves. And I'm absolutely not here to rabble-rouse. I love kids, and that's why I'm doing this. I guess that's it. We got to get the CRT out of here. We're throwing gasoline on flames that are burning too hot already. And based on my travels, which is about half the world, we rate about 2 out of 10 on the racism and prejudice scale. Let's teach them something real. Let's teach them what's out there beyond the boundaries of this county. And let's get them reading. Let's put the Chromebooks down. Okay, let's make that an elective. Yes, they need to know it, okay? But it's the digital revolution is giving these kids the attention span of a goldfish. And they're not going to learn anything that way. They spend too much time staring at screens already. We need to get back to reading, writing. They're learning their arithmetic. I don't fault them on that. But we need to teach them about the world at large. That's all I have to say. Thanks for hearing me.
All right, we're going to move on to our consent agenda then. All right. Let me pull up my stuff. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moving on then to our finance report then this evening. Dr. Hawker, do you want to introduce Katie? Or
You bet. Our business manager, Katie Ebner, will address the board and review the finances.
great.
Thank you, Doctor. Oh. Can you guys hear me?
Mm-mm.
It says it's on, but yeah, I don't know what is going on with this microphone because normally it is a little bit louder. Thank you, Dr. Hawker, Vice Chair Smith, trustees. I'm going to present a finance update. We have 3 items to look at, and I'll see if I can pull it up here. I see. So the first thing we're going to talk about is a report of residual equity transfers. Board policy 7215 states that we are to report to the board transfers of residual equity between funds in excess of $100,000. Typically, I use this as an opportunity to talk about significant residual equity transfers. Here's a list, and the first 2, we'll just really quickly go over them. The first 2 are related to bus purchases. The state pays us some funding for buses that is recorded in the general fund, which we, at the end of the year, will move to our bus fund. And then the second amount is a levy amount that is earmarked for bus purchases. That was in addition to the levy when our bus fleet was aging and we were running the risk of not having enough buses to get students to school. So we are grateful to say that we are getting back in the ballgame as far as buses that are functioning and can take those longer routes for activities. The next transfer is a required transfer. Our federal nutrition program requires that the district general fund pay for the FICA and Medicare expenses for employees who work in that program. So we make that transfer at the end of the year when we have all of our personnel costs. The next is a budgeted transfer from School Plus. So typically we will budget transfers in from either School Plus or Medicaid. We had a really rough year as far as Medicaid reimbursement, not as many reimbursable services. So we are going to transfer $100,000 from School Plus, which on the other hand operated quite well, mostly due to grants throughout the year. There were a lot of specific targeted grants for child care programs. And then the next is, we'll think back to the September 14th, and it should say 20. I thought I had corrected that. September 14th of last year, the board moved to make those tuition-based full-day case sections free for the year. And then going into next year, we're excited that district-wide kindergarten is full day and free of charge. But this is an amount, we already had staff members coded to that fund. And so rather than go through and do transactions to move each staff member's payroll, we just did a year-end transfer for the cost that was going to be covered by our K-3 literacy funding. The last is our blended learning grant. We received a coronavirus relief fund grant, and we identified some costs that were covered in our instructional technology fund. This was a very beneficial move in order to free up some instructional technology funding. If there aren't any questions, I'm going to move on to our next topic, our state revenue update. So this is part of a conversation that we have been having all spring. Actually, I would even go as far back as last fall is when we started having the conversation of our state funding. We didn't think it was going to make the mark of what was budgeted. So thinking back to when we set the budget for state revenue, this was back in April, May of 2020. We weren't sure what enrollment was going to look like. We knew it probably next year wasn't going to look much like we had expected in prior years, but we had to set the budget. So we took prior year's data and came up with a projection. So throughout the fall, with enrollment down, enrollment drives our funding. We knew that the state revenues would be lower than what our budget was set at. We also knew that federal funds were coming in. We also knew that the state was talking about funding us differently. So it wasn't quite panic mode throughout the year. But then we come in February, we projected that we would be about 2.5 million down, I think. And then in July, we got our final numbers of being 3 million down compared to what was budgeted. So this has been an ongoing conversation. Hopefully this isn't a surprise to those of you who have been following along with the finance reports through the spring. The thing the thing that's very interesting to me is that there are protections in the state funding formula for loss in enrollment. And the state protected our units at 509 units. So pre-COVID, our units were 515. So we didn't see as much of a loss from the drop in enrollment. We did see a very significant loss from deep state cuts to the budget. And these were mid-year cuts that were made to the state communicated that we were to use federal funding to backfill these cuts. So in essence, the state has decided that, how we should be using our federal money, and it's to backfill operations.
Okay, could you go into detail too? Is that part of the 5% that was held back at the beginning of the year during the COVID pandemic? The
So-
state did not reimburse that 5%, is that correct?
Right. The 5% holdback was built into the budget, but this is beyond the 5% holdback. So there were very deep cuts to just the basic formula for funding school districts. And so if we hadn't received federal funds, we would have been looking at really significant cuts that impact students for sure. So
Has the state given you any indication yet for this year what their plans are? If they're going to continue with those cuts or if they plan to make whole the budget again?
the budget is set without those cuts, so that's hopeful, but it's not quite there as far as where it was pre-COVID. So when you're comparing to a year with deep cuts and you restore some of it, it makes it look really good when you're comparing from prior year, but truly the cuts are not completely restored. Plus, there are ongoing cost increases just for any organization, so the state has to keep up with those, but that's not a part of the picture either. So,
Katie, can I want to make sure I'm clear on that as well, on those cuts, because it changed a lot, right? The governor's office had a holdback, and then they released some of that funding, and then they did these cuts in the spring, really around, I guess it'd be ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 federal funding that came in as part of the COVID
right.
federal funding packages. And I just want to make sure it was almost a shell game a little bit with the federal funds, in that they reduced some state funding and said use these federal funds that you're going to get out of these ESSER packages to pay for these things, and the state just held the money back. Is that?
Exactly. In documents from JFAC for the budget we're going into next year, it was specifically denoted that districts were going to experience a reduction in revenue and that districts needed to use their federally allocated ESSER funds in order to backfill those cuts. Okay, so summer is busy in the finance office. We are closing out the year. We're going through reconciling, tying out balances in preparation for our independent audit. Every year we have an independent CPA firm that audits the district's books, and they will be on site next week. We've been busy getting ready for them, getting documentation ready, and we also, during this time, start talking about ending fund balance. So one of the most simple ways to look at how a district has done is looking at change in fund balance, so that you're seeing if the district's running in the red or running in the black. How are things looking? And so with the cut in state revenues, we are seeing a larger deficit than we expected when we built the budget. So that truly is that $3 million we were looking at short of what the state revenues were projected at. So we're going to see about a 1.7 million. That's what I'm projecting right now. Of course, that changes depending on, if we get year-end shipments coming in, what day did they come in? I don't spend too much time on loading docs, seeing if, the books came on June 30th or July 1. That's how we determine where they get posted. That would cause a variance in what this projection is. So. And then another thing that was just sort of interesting is we look back at last year when we had our fund balance went up, and it was very unexpected that our fund balance increased significantly. And if we think back to last year, we talked about how the state funding formula, they didn't quite handle the COVID closures in the way that I think districts expected it. We're funded on attendance, and the state formula counted that whole closure as perfect attendance, which gave us quite the bump in support units. So if you look at our fund balance trend, you see that in FY17, FY18, those were the years that we kind of turned the corner as far as getting out of deficit spending. FY19, we had a modest increase. FY20, we had a very large increase. That was from that surplus due to the unexpected way that the state funded us. And then we come back down for our projection for FY21. So it's sort of, the joke is the state giveth and the state taketh away. So we see that we're about where we were pre-COVID, which is, it would have been nice to stay up at that higher number, but it's just how the state formula is working out for us. Any questions on that before I move on? So I'm just going to quickly update you all, the Hayden Lake School, the sale closed on July 16th. The district received a net total of just under $2.3 million in proceeds from that sale after, prepaids and a few fees. And so those funds are deposited to our land acquisition funds. That's where we would deposit any proceeds from a sale of property for the school district. And so that brought the total up to $4.15 million. These funds are earmarked specifically for the board to take action on purchasing or developing new property. And so, discussions leading up to selling this property were that we need land in different areas than that school was located. So those funds are there and they will stay in the land acquisition fund until the board identifies property and votes to purchase it. And I have Q&A for the board.
Katie, do you have any updates on enrollments for this coming school year, how they're looking?
I wish I had looked at it this morning, but we are, as of probably last week, we're looking good because we budgeted for 500 more students. So we're at that mark of where we budgeted. We're seeing more secondary students, which is a little bit concerning because of overcrowding in our secondary schools. However, the accountant is happy because secondary students generate more funding. So that will be a positive impact to the school district's budget. So,
great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. I don't have any questions other than the ones you already answered for me.
Thank you all.
Welcome, Jen. Do you have questions?
No, I was able to look at what you had in the packet, Katie, so thank you very much for your time this evening. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Katie. Next up, we have the consideration of our assessment and student achievement. Dr. Hucker, do you want to introduce this?
Yes, Dr. Mike Nelson will present to the board.
Well, good evening, everyone. Chair Brumley, good to see you tonight. Vice Chair Smith, Superintendent Hawker, members of the board. Welcome to August. It is amazing to believe that in over a month, just a little bit over a month, we will be seeing our students for the 2021-2022 school year. In my world, we're still looking at a lot of 2020-2021 results. In fact, two of the items that are in front of you tonight are how we performed in terms of statewide accountability, and as well as our AP results as well. We'll take a look at each of those, if I don't just click the wrong place. The first, I want to talk a little bit about statewide accountability. The first thing that's important for us to know when we take a look at this is it is talking about English language arts and mathematics. Our students did take science assessments this year, but we have brand new science standards in the state of Idaho, so it was considered a field test, so we don't receive any results for that. So everything that we're looking at right now is going to be based off of our performance in English language arts and mathematics. Back in the day, the state of Idaho used to rank and sort our schools based on a 5-star system. 5-star schools identified what they perceived was the best in our state. 1-star schools were those schools that were identified as, quote, documented and persistent struggling schools. And those were the schools that received extra support from the state to hopefully get things improved. Now we have a brand new framework through the Every Student Succeeds Act, which was enacted by Congress in 2015 and replaced No Child Left Behind. You need to know that everything that our students do are reported in aggregate at the state website of idahoschools.org. There, any member of our community can log on to see our performance as a district, or they can go down to each school to be able to see how they're performing along the way. There are no more summative ratings or rankings at this particular place, just a clear delineation of how our students are performing relative to those indicators. In 2015-2016, the state also identified, well, what are the things that we want to report to our community? And those are some of the things that you see there on the screen. Proficiency is one, so we will be able to see what percentage of our students are proficient or greater on a variety of different standardized assessments in reading and mathematics, eventually science. The other is growth, because it's not just important to see that a student is proficient, it's also important to see that they're growing year to year to year to eventually meet college and career readiness skills. So some of those assessments that they're using are up on the board. The English language arts is proficiency in there as well. We also bring in cohort graduation rate, which we report usually in November to you. We also take a look at what is called readiness to advance, and that is those students who are prepared for the next level of coursework as they exit grades 5 and 8 going into middle school and high school. We've also talked to you about our engagement survey data. That is also compiled at the idahoschools.org site for anybody to be able to see, as well as college and career readiness indicators. So based off of all of these things, we also are required that we provide assessments to 95% of all students in all subgroups. Subgroups could be everything from males to females. It could be those students receiving special programs such as special education, or those students experiencing homelessness. We have to test 95% of all of our military connected families. We have to test 95% of all of our students in different ethnic subgroups, students who are on free and reduced lunch, and all of that. So as of right now, we have an opportunity to be able to see how our students are performing relative to those indicators. Normally, the state would give us our final numbers at this point, but we are in the middle of it. Everything was delayed at least a month at this point. The state has identified that in our district, 52 areas of students did not meet that 95% assessment threshold. And there is a caveat on the white line. We have a small percentage of our population that qualifies to take the alternate assessment. These are students typically served in our life skills classrooms who do not take the standard assessment as their grade level peers may. So some of our variance is going to be from those students who just, we don't have the results yet for them. We don't expect to see those results in a while. Based off of those areas, some of the variance that we saw was in students experiencing homelessness. Students, especially second semester, who were experiencing homelessness, we were able to test 93.8% of them. But again, if a student was receiving the alternate assessment and homeless, they may show up as a negative for us at this particular point as a non-participant. To be able to remedy some of those areas, we did submit 156 appeals to the state. Those were students who were unable to test because they were medically fragile, who were in quarantine, that we just could not provide the assessment to them in a safe and effective manner. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We've just finished participation appeals. This next week, we should be able to see an updated review of all of our participation. And we'll finally get a chance to look at all of the results shortly, which will be posted on idahoschools.org. I'll be more than glad to either stand publicly to be able to share the final results for you, or just provide them in a board memo to you at that particular time. So that is an overview of where we're at with statewide accountability and participation. Is there anything that I can answer for you in that convoluted area before we move on to our AP results?
Dr. Nelson, thank you. No question tonight. Just, I think my preference would be that we review that in a board meeting as opposed to a board memo. So if that's possible, Chair Brumley.
Duly noted.
Harry, no objection. So yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Mike.
You know I love creating slides. I'll put them together. So now let's take a look at something that might be a little bit easier to understand, our AP exams. First of all, we want to take a look at how our student enrollment is doing in these courses. These are the highest levels of courses that we provide, tied to college and career readiness standards, as well as recognized by colleges and universities worldwide. In this particular thing, the first thing we want to take a look at is how many students actually took an AP course this last year, and how many students sat for the exam in that course. This is a 14-year slide, which takes a look at how many students were enrolled in AP courses. That is the blue bar, starting in 2007 along the way. Then ending up in the red bar. That's the number of students who actually took exams. You can see that it is extremely important for us, if a student is dedicating themselves to taking an AP course over the course of a year, we want them to take the corresponding exam. Not all students choose to do that, though. So there is going to be some variance in the results because it is not going to reflect every student in every AP course. We also have some students who actually self-study for an AP course that we do not offer within our own district, and I'll address that here in just a few. But as of this last year, we had 385 students at both Lake City and Coeur d'Alene high schools who took a total of 784 AP courses this last year in 2021. In fact, we had one student who took 9 AP courses last year. I can only imagine what that life was like, but good for them. We had 139 students take 1 AP course in their schedule. 154 students took 2, so that was actually the highest percentage of all of our AP. Students took, on average, 2 courses. 53 students took 3, 21 students took 4, and 17 students had 5 or more AP courses. Ultimately, in that trend, we've seen a level off over the past several years. We have been anchoring around the 370 students district-wide taking AP courses. One of the things we also take a look at is what is the representation of our students? When we start taking a look at equity, we're looking at, okay, we have our general student population, but we're also seeing, is the population representative in these courses as well? Or do we need to do a better job of trying to make sure that any student who wants the interest or has the willingness to take an AP course can take it? So here are some examples of what that looked like this last year. Of all of the students taking AP courses this last year, 57% of those students were female, 42% were male. This is going to put a bullseye up here, which identifies a statistical significance, meaning it's not just by chance that it occurred that way. In fact, as a district, we have more males than females in our high schools, 52% males. But only 42% of those males are choosing to take an AP class. That's an area that we might be able to work upon to get better equity within our course enrollment. Of those students, we also had 93% of them self-identify as being white. Well, as a district, we are 84% white, meaning again that we have an overrepresentation of one race within these AP courses. We could do a better job of trying to ensure that all students and backgrounds have the ability to be able to take an AP course. Let's also take a look at a couple of other equity lenses for you. First of all, students receiving free and reduced lunch. Only 9% of our students receiving free and reduced lunch took an AP course this last year. That can be compared to 30% in all of our high schools. So again, an underrepresentation of students experiencing poverty are represented within our data. And finally, the other lens that we will use are student services. Only 0.3% of students receiving disability services took an AP course. And remember, this is maybe just not cognitive disabilities, this is any disability along the way of any services. We could do a better job of identifying areas to be able to include students receiving services in these courses. Now that you can see a little bit of background as to who these students are taking these exams, let's go in and take a look at the exams themselves. Of those students taking an AP course this last year, 84% almost chose to take the corresponding exam. 16% of those students chose not to take the exam. Unfortunately, we don't always have reason as to why students choose to take the exam or do not choose to take the exam. I was actually talking with a teacher from Coeur d'Alene High School today who was expecting more of her students' results to be there, but on the day of the exam, they just chose not to show. They paid for the exam, but for whatever reason, on that day, they did not feel comfortable taking the exam and was not able to show. We also have some students who are self-studying. Most of these students are in biology, the economics, macroeconomics and microeconomics, and psychology. We had students pretty much take an online course or self-study for the exam, and actually they performed very well. But that also gives us an opportunity if students are choosing to take coursework that we don't offer to find a better way to be able to approach their learning needs. How did those students do? Let's dive into some results. AP scores are on a 1 to 5 scale. 1 meaning that there is no recommendation. The College Board believes that the score that was submitted does not meet any of their standards. A 5 is a perfect score, meaning that it was the highest recommendation and the student is extremely well qualified for collegiate level coursework. There's our distribution from this last year of all of the exams taken by those 375 students. You can see a majority of students received a 3, which is at grade level or considered for college readiness. A 4, well qualified, and a 5, extremely well qualified. 70% of all students who took an AP exam this last year were in a 3 or higher.
Dr. Nelson?
Yes, sir.
On AP test scores, a student, and I know it's up to the college or university, but they can potentially earn credit, is that correct?
Correct.
Based on their test score?
So each college and university controls that acceptance and recognition. For instance, at the University of Idaho, if a student receives a 3 in many of the subject areas, it does grant college credit. Some more selective universities are going to be more selective in what they provide. It also affects scholarships. So sometimes scholarships will kick in based on 4s and 5s. But it is up to each individual university, and we do recommend to all students taking AP exams that they use Zello or a similar tool to look at the recognition of their chosen colleges and universities. Any other follow-up, Mr. Miller? If we take a look at that same distribution over 2 years, how are students performing? What we saw is pretty consistent between students receiving a 5 and a 4. We did see a little bit of a drop-off from last year for students receiving 4s, but unfortunately we did see an uptick in those number of students receiving 2s over this last year. Now we did have 60 more exams than we provided last year, so that's a good thing to be able to have more students and more exams given. But we do need to also start taking a look at why students didn't perform as well. The College Board does provide a lot of rich data for our AP teachers. They will be able to go in and examine the items within the exams. They'll be able to look at where their students fared the best, and then curricularly and professionally will be able to adjust that along the way. It is exciting, though, that we did see 44 perfect scores from this last year. If we also take a look at that and break those results down by discipline area, you see all of our mean results by discipline here. And do you notice that some area is missing? English, history, math, science, world languages are there, but there's one that we typically see results on, and it's our fine and performing arts. Unfortunately, in the past year, we lost all of our AP Studio Art, AP Art History, and AP Music Theory classes from this last year. For whatever reason, they were just not offered. That is an area that we will need to take a look at because we definitely have students who are talented in those areas. But overall, our mean average out of a possible 5 was a 2.77. Our greatest average was in mathematics and computer science. Always good to see. Our lowest average and also the fewest number of exams were given in world languages. So what does this data show us? We have an opportunity to look at data internally all the time, and we came up with a couple of ideas of things that we really think are going to be actionable items for us along the way. We did have a large percentage of students meeting 3 or higher, so we are doing a good job in making sure that our professional educators know what is expected of them and that our students know what is expected of them. We had high use also in a tool called Albert, which is fully aligned with our AP exams. Those students who used Albert regularly did perform well on their exams, so that's another thing that we want to continue emphasizing. But we also did see a weakness in that number of 2s, so we need to go in and start finding out why those students didn't perform to expectations. An opportunity, we already talked about the equity issues and that we need to make sure that those students taking AP courses and the corresponding exams really are representative of all students enrolled within our high schools. To increase awareness that these courses exist, to encourage students to take them and take the highest challenging courses that we have available. Ultimately, we do have some goals that have already been embedded within our comprehensive improvement plan that will come to you in the first day of October. That is board approved and state mandated. We'll have some new goals in there as well as some college and career readiness benchmarks.
Dr. Nelson, do you know if you had very many students take advantage of the AP Academy? I know this is the first summer that you guys were going to offer that, but kind of an opportunity for students to kind of get their feet wet taking their first AP class.
Unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that question immediately. I do know, unfortunately, the enrollment was low generally. I will find out that information and get it back to you.
Dr. Nelson, I had two questions on the data before we go to that recognition part. The first one, in past years, we've seen a breakdown by subject, I believe, even by instructor, building, I believe. Is that information you can make available?
Yes, and it will be posted. One of the things that we are seeing is that we're still seeing some results trickle in. We had a couple of students who took the latest of the makeup exams, and there's a couple of students who we know took the assessment that scores have not populated. I'll be more than glad to do that. And additionally, it's always posted at our district website under departments assessments. You'll be able to see the results in there by course, by building, over 5 years. As soon as that is, I will definitely make sure that you have awareness of it.
Okay, thank you. My second question was, I believe this year the instructor had a choice on these examinations, whether they were written like a paper exam or an online exam. Am I correct in that, or was that driven by College Board?
No, you are correct. Students this last year had the chance to do one of two administrations. They could take a paper pencil assessment that would be more traditional of an AP exam, or they could take an online assessment. It was driven mostly by students, and then the teacher had the ability to be able to administer at specific times. But each of them had windows that they could choose from to choose either the paper exam or the online exam.
Just curious if you could see results by that. I'm just curious, did we see difference in our results based on the format of the test?
In the exams results that we have, I don't believe that I can differentiate it between the two. However, we have record of who chose what, and we could backward map that. Let me take a look at that and get back to you.
Okay, I don't want to create a big research project for you, but
you know I love
if
it.
it's
Come on.
something easy. All right, thank you.
Any other ideas or things that we need to take a look at with our AP exams before we finalize this up? Okay, well, we are excited because we did have some students who performed extraordinarily high. So here in the next couple of weeks, I and a bunch of my colleagues are going to get an opportunity to go put a bunch of these out. So these are perfect signs, or perfect score signs, and we'll be presenting these to the front lawns of any student who had a perfect score this last year. Tentatively, we're going to be doing this in about 2 weeks, and hopefully bringing again more awareness that this is a huge accomplishment for our students, and they deserve the recognition that they have. Again, we have 7 students with 2 5s. We have 2 students with 3 perfect scores on all of their exams along the way, and we're hoping that this continues to drive interest in our coursework as well as doing their absolute best, because their best truly does matter. Overall, I've presented a lot of data and a lot of consideration for you. Is there anything I can do to assist you further?
Doesn't look like it. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very
Nelson,
much.
very much. Okay, that moves us into our action items. I just first wanted to say thank you to Vice Chair Smith for running the meeting in my absence. I appreciate that very much. Okay, first item is our 2021-2022 school bus routes. Looks like Mr. Voller's up at the podium.
Good evening, Chair Brumley, Dr. Hawker, members of the board. One of the annual things that we need to do is bring to you our school bus routes for the year for your approval. So we put them in your packet for consideration. But before we do that, I'd like to invite Donda Walsh to come up to the podium with me. I'm pleased to announce Donda formally as our new Director of Transportation, and to thank Donda for stepping in at the sudden passing of Jill as interim director. And pleased to say that she is interviewed, and we have hired her as the permanent Director of Transportation. So we welcome her to the team, and I'm going to have her just give a really brief summary of the work her and her team have been doing in preparation for the school bus routes for this year.
And thank you for your time. We've presented the routes for your review and approval, and there was just one route there that had significant change. where we're driving up East Grandview Drive and on North Stonehaven to help eliminate to broaden the area that we serve in that, on that route. Also to provide stops that were more safe for the children and for, to hopefully eliminate traffic buildup on roads in that area. But currently on the routes, we have presented their routes that we finished the school year off, because with the COVID, that situation, the short staff, we had to combine 6 elementary routes and 6 secondary routes and absorb them into other routes. So we are going to go ahead and start the school year that way. Getting closer to that date, we're hoping that we'll be able to recruit more drivers. We currently have 8 drivers in training, hoping that will alleviate it. It'll bring it to a point to where we could put the routes back to where they were, but we don't have any flex. We won't have anybody to fill in case there's a driver out. So that's going to be one of the moving parts. One of the other moving parts going into this is the availability of buses. Yes, we do have 5 new buses that came in, but we had to get rid of a couple because of their age. And also, too, as we were ending off the school year, a lot of those buses that we had, several of them broke down. And with the situation and finding the manpower externally to get those buses up and running again, that was a hardship. We have a bit of a break right now because of the summer to be able to get those buses back and running, but not exactly sure where we're going to be come the beginning of the school year. Also, too, another moving part is with the enrollment of students, how many kids will be back on the bus, whereas they weren't last year. In the packet, too, we've placed some new safety busings. All of the safety busings that are in black on there, they all are up for reevaluation. So those, as soon as the school starts, we'll start reevaluating those. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer, but that pretty much is an overview of where we are at.
I had a quick question. Thank you for the presentation and welcome.
Thank you.
But I was curious, I know you guys have been advertising for bus drivers. How has it been going this summer? And can you give us an update on will we have enough drivers for the year and substitutes?
Yeah, and we have 4 buses out there now with signs on them opposed to the one, which has helped. We also had a open house, invited people to come and see what we were all about. It included people who could possibly be a workforce for us. It would have been parents who had kindergartners wanted to jump on the bus to see how that was, and actually we got interest from that too. So that was really nice. We do have 8 people in training. 1 person is returning back. Well, actually 2 is returning back. We could open up the routes right now, but we don't have that extra flex to be able to provide a driver in the seat. Last year when we ended up, we had days where there was 1 person in the office. We had all the office staff out on the, good thing they have CDLs. All the office staff was out, all the mechanics were out on the road. It was a pretty tough thing, so if anybody knows of anybody who wants to be a driver, you just let me know.
And please pass on to your staff. I know it was a difficult year for them, and the board was really appreciative of all of their hard work, so thank you to them.
Yes, they're a team and great hard workers. Yeah. Anything else?
I have just a quick question about, and this might be for Jeff maybe, but a route tracker, or I don't know, I can't remember what the program's called, but I know we started kind of rolling that out last year and it didn't go full function. Is that something we're going to have for this school year.
Yeah, the technology is on the buses now. We were beta testing it at the end of that year. We're probably going to start the year continuing to beta test that and start to broaden that throughout the year. And we're looking at some parent apps availability with that now. We're going to beta test those at the beginning of the year as well, so that parents can track where students are, or when students got on and off the bus, and that'll give us more resources. So with some of the setbacks that we have with transitions in the department, right now Donda is running the department by herself. We have an opening for the secretary and the office manager currently posted. So we are doing the best we can to move that forward, but we continue to do that with the resources that we have available. The one other thing that I think I might add as well is with some of the changes that we made in transportation with raising the wages, I think that also secured some of the drivers of not leaving this year as well. So I think that helped with the retainage aspect of it as well. So.
Well, thank you very much, both Donda and Jeff, for all your hard work. I just would say the same thing that Trustee May did, and just on behalf of the board, it literally, I know, was everything you guys had to keep the figurative wheels on the bus last year, because I know that there were literally people who don't typically drive but have CDLs out there getting our kids where they needed to go, and it was very touch and go. So I'm so excited to hear we have 8 drivers in training. Glad to hear that we've solidified rehires, and so excited probably to hear from Jeff as we go through the school year on how things are going. So thank you very much. Is there any more comment or questions? All right, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the 2021-2022 bus routes as presented.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Okay, next item is our curriculum textbook approval. It looks like Ms. Groutman is on her way up.
In the board of so we're saying that you approve put them out, and we had no on them. Sorry. I kept leaning forward more, thinking that would help. Are there any questions that I might answer for the board before your decision?
Doesn't look like it. So do I have a motion?
I move to approve the pre-calculus enhanced with graphing utilities and advanced placement U.S. government and politics for the 2021-2022 school year as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Did you also approve the advanced placement U.S. government and politics? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yes, she put them both in the same motion.
Thank you, I apologize.
That's okay. All right, next we have our student advisory group bylaws. Is this you, Dr. Hawk? Oh, he's not here.
We anticipated. As you know, you've seen the student advisory group's bylaws and recommendations, and we were hoping that one of the student advisory group members would be able to attend tonight in case the board had any questions about any of the updates and modifications that they've made to their bylaws. But otherwise, after reviewing those, it's my recommendation that the board would approve those.
And I'm happy to sit for any questions if any board members have any questions. I worked with them a tiny bit on this, so any questions, feel free to ask.
And I would be comfortable. I think we've had enough discussions with Austin when he's been here and reviewed these for a couple months now, so I'm fine moving forward if everybody else is. Okay, do I have a motion?
I move to approve the SAG bylaws for the 2021-2022 school year as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Well, thank you very much to Austin and the vice chair and those that have put all their work into it, as well as to Trustee May and for your time in working with that group. Thank you very much. Okay. Sorry, I turned myself off. We have our draft reopening plan for the 2021-2022 school year. Dr. Hawker.
Yes, thank you. Just as a reminder as well, although this is a requested action item for approval tonight so that we can be in compliance with the state requirements that this draft proposal is presented no later than August 2nd, which happens to be today. Just want to remind the board as well that the draft was written in very draft format with my hopes to obtain additional input and information in regards to the details of that draft, and that will be one of our topics of discussion at your upcoming board workshop on October 16th, just in a couple of weeks. Excuse me, did I say October? August, the other so August 16th, thank you, at your workshop. So with that, I certainly would entertain any questions or if anybody has any about the reopening plan. Otherwise, I know you've seen it. We've had it out there for as long as we possibly could have had it out there to receive input. And just remind everybody that it is in very rough draft form tonight for approval, and then we'll work on that throughout this next month with the intent to have you approve the plan in more of a formality at your September board meeting.
I have a question, Dr. Hawker. I don't see in our packet an actual motion to approve this tonight. Is it intended that we would, or we just? Okay. Okay, so I will, just so you guys know, I will need a motion to approve the draft. Anybody have any questions or comments right now?
And maybe this will come up at the workshop, but conversation with Panhandle Health and recommendations from them. When can we expect to see that at all, or how does that influence our draft here?
Yes, great question. Yes, the plan is for that to take place as well, as best as we can organize it at your upcoming workshop. And we plan to solicit input again from community and others throughout these next couple of weeks. And we are inviting some health officials from Panhandle Health to also be able to be there at that meeting. Hopefully, that has not been confirmed yet, but the point would be to be able to provide with you a well-rounded discussion for that workshop session.
Thank you. And have you heard any updates? I know the state school board last year gave us some advice, especially regarding quarantining. Have you heard if they're going to weigh in and provide any advice for the state in general?
You know, I have not heard that yet, although we have meetings beginning tomorrow through the rest of the week that I'll be planning to attend those meetings, and so I'm hopeful that I'll be able to bring any of that information back to the board at that time.
I have a question, I guess, just more about the 16th. So this, if I'm hearing you right and understand, I guess this draft is based off some state requirements that the state put out and said you have to have answers to these items. That's correct. And we did that. Obviously, we've had some public comment over the last few days of, hey, what about this? What about that? You kind of more details. And so that's what you anticipate through the 16th?
Absolutely.
Or on the 16th?
Yes.
Discussion of some of those greater details.
Exactly correct.
How about, and this might be a board discussion, but and maybe it's on the 16th, but there's been a lot of questions of with CDC guidance changing, are we going to entertain changing? You know, we made this decision back in June, I believe, and so I think that's a question that obviously people want answered. Wow, what timing! Wow. Was that on purpose? That was amazing. If it was on purpose, that was fantastic. If that was accidental, that was fantastic too. So, anyhow, do you anticipate us taking that up on the 16th? Were you looking for a little that discussion? I mean, I guess, preference would be if we're approving the draft, then this is kind of our plan at this point until it's not our plan.
Well, that
would be my anticipation.
Yes, if I may say, one thing that I think we've all learned last year is that the the reopening plans, we need to be able to evaluate the constant change and conversation virtually every day, and definitely at least every week. The intent of the workshop as a workshop, no formal decision or vote will come from that meeting. It is simply a workshop to vet these conversation items with the intent for the board to formulate their best return to learning, even though the board meeting will be in September, your next board meeting, but that return to learning plan with the most up-to-date information that's available for the board at that time. So the upcoming workshop in 2 weeks is just to get you as much information as we can reasonably get you in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, because when we initially approved this draft, it wasn't with a recommendation from a superintendent or Panhandle or even our lead nurse, Nicole Piekarski. So I guess my question would be, we approved this in June and much has changed since June. So I would like just to see some updates and a recommendation from you on a reopening plan.
Absolutely.
I'll make a motion to approve, if there's not further questions, sorry, Jen. But I'm still pretty comfortable with the basic tenets of this plan, even given the changes that have come out. So I'd just like to make that comment. So I'll make a motion to approve the 2021-2022 school year draft reopening plan, or school year reopening plan, Ms. Town.
And I'll second.
Any further discussion? And I would just, I will mimic's not the right word. I will just shadow what Trustee Morrisroe commented on, that this would be what I would anticipate looking at opening the school year under as well. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Hawker. And I believe Ms. Ebner was involved in this. And we also had Ms. O'Dowd, the school's attorney, in light of the requirements under for us to comply with in order to receive some of the ESSER funding that comes under this reopening plan. So thank you for the very quick endeavor. See you back there, Ms. Ebner. Thank you. Okay, we have policies for action. Dr. Hogger, did you have any other comments or anything you wanted to say on those policies?
No, other than certainly we're able to answer any questions if you have any. Everybody's here that could address them. If I know we've talked about them at your last meeting, so I guess we'll leave it at that.
All right. Any board member have any questions, comments? I see we only received one public comment as far as the memorials to the schools, and so everything else was left alone and nobody commented on. So in light of that, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, and I just want to make a comment before I do that. On 3010 open enrollment, I think that was just a good use of us tweaking the policy last year and kind of going back and reflecting that maybe it wasn't quite as clear as our intention was. And so I think we did a nice job cleaning that up to solidify that process, that once a student open enrolls at a secondary school or at a high school, that approvals is guaranteed and that they aren't subject to year on that. So I guess thank you, Ms. Town and board, for working through that language and getting that approved or adjusted. So
I would agree with that, Trustee Morrisroe. I just think it's great for kids in high school to, once they're in, then they know they are going to stay there if they choose to. So I think that's a great change to, or I should say clarification to our policy.
I'll make a motion to approve the policies as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, policies changed. Thank you. Okay, so that is all we had this evening on action items. So information, moving on. So Dr. Hawker, the J.A. and Catherine Albertson Foundation Grant.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Just wanted to provide a brief update. Last week, I was able to meet with the J.A. and Catherine Albertson's Foundation and discuss a grant that was essentially organized and put together at the end of this last school year. And then with all of the changes at central office, with me being new, you can imagine that when Albertsons is potentially interested in granting us $500,000, they would like to visit with the superintendent as well to make sure that maybe I don't have a different thought process involved. So it was a great opportunity to visit with them. They have offered us a 5-year grant, so essentially about $100,000 each year. The details of that grant are in your board packet, but to provide some professional development opportunities as we we're initially going to open a magnet school, a K-12 magnet school this year, but as we all know, that was put on hold for a little bit. So this year will give us an opportunity to better prepare for that opening and to address some challenges that we have at the state level in regards to offering credits to potentially high school students for mastery of coursework rather than the typical Carnegie units and the ABCD type of grades. And there are some private schools. There's at least one private school, One Stone in Boise, that's already doing this, but they're private, so they get to play by a little different rules. But this grant will give us an opportunity to help provide professional development to our teachers. Our goal would be to try to restaff and rehire and be prepared for that return of that magnet school for next year, and try to maybe have those folks in place by maybe Christmas, early spring this year, so that we can take advantage of some of this initial year one Albertsons Foundation grant money, and then they're offering to provide that each and every year for up to 5 years for a total of about $500,000. So again, it's not an action item or anything. Just wanted to present it to the board. I'm sure some of you have probably received some updates in the last few months about that grant as well, but just wanted to reconfirm that they have committed to be on board, and if we so choose, if it all works out, we can possibly take advantage of some of those dollars to help provide some professional development to help our teachers be better prepared for basically project-based learning, which I think can benefit the entire district. We have lots of vocational programs already that are very heavy involved in projects as their grading practices, and so to take advantage of some of this additional professional development for all of our teachers could be a big benefit. So I think it'll be a good opportunity.
I guess kind of a question and kind of just a comment. I think at some point in the near future, if I'd like some clarity on what Brian Kelly is working on this year regarding the school, and maybe bringing it back to us as here's kind of the plan for this coming year. What are we working on? Maybe some more education as well. I mean, so much happened within the last year, and what are we moving towards, and how could this benefit our district? Maybe bring the conversation back around to that. So
Absolutely will. In fact, Mr. Kelly accompanied me to this meeting at the Albertsons Foundation last week, and our plans and intent are to bring this information to you at your September board meeting, where he will be at to give you kind of an outline, a schematic of what we need to work on throughout this next year so that we can be ready to provide that opportunity to our students.
Great. Terrific. Thank you.
Dr. Tucker, I was curious about the first year grant money. So since the eSchool is not open this year, how will you guys be utilizing those funds? Will it be geared maybe shifting to NEXA, or do you have a plan or an idea?
So Albertsons kind of outlines that, and recognizing our current status and situation, that first year grant is just under $60,000, so a little bit less, and it primarily has to do with some on-site visits to One Stone, the private school that's in Boise that is doing the project-based learning for some of our staff. That's where a good majority of those funds are provided. They will provide the One Stone PD support, and then there's a conference. Well, again, no, primarily it's the One Stone site visits. That's the majority of those costs for that first year. Then the second year, that goes into a little deeper work, and they have budgeted $108,000 for that year.
I've got 3 questions for you on this one.
All right, one at a time.
So the first one in there's a retention of key personnel, and it talks about Kelly Nichols, who is no longer with the district, and that could hold up the grant. So I assume that's just some paperwork, and we're working on updating that to the correct person.
That is
either Ms.
correct,
Barrett
and
or
I
yourself.
believe that's why we had the meeting last week to make that update. What they provided me was a breakdown of the 5-year funding opportunities.
Second question is, it mentions Bloom in the description, the Bloom, I don't know if it's Bloom Foundation or Bloom Organization, that I know it's pretty active in charter school setups around the country. So are they involved in this project to any degree, or
They
some
could
degree?
be. We actually met with them as well, and they have provided some assistance to One Stone as One Stone started. And so simply because they have very close relationships with Albertsons, and Albertsons Foundation is writing this check, Bloom has offered potentially some support from them. That we'll get some more details on the specifics of that and be able to share that out at your September board meeting with Mr. Kelly.
Was that Terry Ryan with Bloom?
It was.
And then the last question, I guess, you kind of briefly just commented, charter schools operate by a little different rules than public schools. And is it appropriate, or should we have some discussion around that? And should this be a district-sponsored charter school versus a magnet school? And would that create some flexibility, resolving some of those issues? And, maybe that's a discussion obviously that's a big discussion, but
Yeah,
we should talk about that at some point.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
One other quick question, and maybe it needs to be asked, but if in a year from now, I don't anticipate our plans going a different way, but if the first year, let's say we don't, for whatever reason, open the school, do we pay back that first year grant, or we hold on to that grant money? And
Yes, there's no obligation for completion of the 4 years. It's also why they broke it down into 4-year specific budgets. Obviously, their hope is that we would do that, and assuming that the intent and the opportunities still exist and the desire is still there, I see no reason why we wouldn't carry this through. It will take 3 to 4 years to really get the system in place, and Mr. Kelly and his team and all of us will be working through those details over this next fall, so that we'll be able to have some even more information for you later this school year. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Hawker. Our next information item is our school counseling. It looks like I have Ms. Andy West up at the podium.
Yes. Good evening, Chair Brumley, Vice Chair Smith, Dr. Hawker, and members of the board. So I'm pleased to provide you tonight with just an update on where we're at. This is based on some discussion that was had in the spring regarding our school counseling program. And so we do have some updates to share, and then some next steps that we would like to talk to you about. So the first update is that historically, our school counselors have not had a specified district office liaison. Our school counselors are supervised in their school buildings, and they definitely have an important scope of work, and we definitely saw the need for them to have that representation at our district office so that we can be responsive to their needs, and also so that we can do what we're going to do, and that's have monthly meetings with leadership and make sure that the programs are operating in the same way across schools, so that students have a similar experience regardless of what school they attend. So that person is me. I will be the school counselor liaison for this coming school year, and as my role in mental health coordinator, it seemed like a good fit. Also in my work with the school counselors, I'm excited to learn more from them and more about their specific duties, both at elementary and at our secondary level. So this role currently will include our monthly meetings and collaborations with our counseling leads. We will talk a little bit later in this presentation about some committee meetings. I will be coordinating those committee meetings, and also communicating between school counselors and the district office team, or providing the opportunity for those school counselors to communicate directly if they have information that they would like to share. So also, just to provide an update, we were able to offer for the first time this year, and at the request of our school counselors, a legal roundtable, which just provided our school counselors access to our legal team to ask policy-based questions. Our policies are very clear, and yet, as anybody knows, when you take policy and direct it into practice, sometimes you have questions about specific situations or how they can best handle their work so that it is absolutely in line with our policy and also with state law and any mandates that are coming from state or federal government. So we had that roundtable in May, and we will be offering it again in January of 2022. They'll be about midway through their work for the year. It was really great to clarify just little things to make sure that we are doing the best that we can for our students. So we also took an opportunity or had an opportunity to review our current board policy. There was question about the scope of, not question, just good discussion about what is the scope of school counseling services. Is that written down? And so we reviewed both policy 2300 and 2300P, and those policies really do provide a good definition of school counseling services. They obviously are not exhaustive because you cannot write down every thing that a professional will do in the scope of their job. That would be impossible. But they really do provide a good scope of school counseling services and what they are intended, or school counseling programs are intended for. And then also we do have board policy 2425, which allows any of our parents or legal guardians the right to opt out of any district adopted curriculum and or the district's implementation of practices, policies, and procedures if those are in conflict with the family's beliefs. And so though we do not have an opt-in for school counseling services, we absolutely have the policy mechanism in place if a legal guardian or parent decides that that is not a service that they would wish their child to receive. So we really feel like those policies at this point capture and allow us to operate in the scope of school counseling services. And then I just wanted to bring up board policy 3500F, F1 and F2, which we will be talking about later tonight. But those policies do provide a good delineation between school counseling services and specific long-term mental health therapy, which are different. And this policy provides clear delineation between and gives wording for the consent of mental health services in our schools. And those services are provided by a mental health therapist that is not a school counselor. And those services are only provided when consent is given from a parent or legal guardian. So when we reviewed these board policies, we felt like they really did a good job of defining school counseling and also what the difference between school counseling and mental health therapy was. I'm going to pause there and ask if you have any questions, because that's a little bit of a meaty slide. Good? Okay. Okay, so that brings us to next steps. So based again on the discussion over the spring, we do think it's important to have a committee. That committee will be appointed in the spring just with the purpose of aligning practice and or proposing a counseling procedure that could address the question of when to refer a student to long-term mental health services. I think we will discover and also discuss later tonight is that our community is in a bit of crisis with regards to providing the adequate amount of mental health services that the demand is for. And so as a committee, we need to review what our students have access to and how we can do the best that we can to partner with students and families so that we can provide those services to students in need, obviously alongside and with their parents or legal guardians as partners. We would request, if a school board trustee would like to participate, that you would be invited to participate in this committee work. And our projected timeline is to begin work in late August when our counselors are back, and to provide an update or recommendation to the board by October of 2021. And that is the extent of my presentation tonight. So does anyone have any questions that I can answer for you?
And back to that first bullet point up there,
yes.
I'm hearing from families that they're months out from long-term mental health care. Is that correct? And could you speak to that just a little bit? I mean, and so that role maybe that we're playing in the schools?
Yeah, so I don't want to speak for any private agency. Many of our private agencies are accepting clients. Many of our private agencies are not. We have heard from our partner Heritage Health that they are at a 300 client wait list currently for mental health services. And that's for a full day worth of schedules. What we've seen in mental health service delivery is that those after school spots are coveted and they go quickly. And so when we consider a student having access to services in the after school, that's always been a bit of a struggle in our community. But absolutely, we are seeing the demand increase significantly, and students, we often had trouble supporting families to find the right fit of counselor just because the wait lists were so significant.
Okay, thanks.
No comments, but thank you for the update. And I'd be willing to participate in this committee if and when they get to that point, if no one else is.
Thank you.
Hearing no one else jumping right in, Trustee Marshrow, I think it's yours. So thank you very much for volunteering to do that. So, Andy, be sure to reach out to Trustee Marshrow and let him know when that meeting's scheduled.
Will do.
Anybody else? Any other questions, comments? I too just want to extend a thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing the intersection and hopefully having some real clear delineation between what we're doing in our schools and when we need to be referring kids out, so that parents know that, and then parents can know what to consent to or what not to consent to.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Annie. Okay, I have Coeur d'Alene Public Library satellite locations. Looks like maybe Scott Mabin up there at the podium. Nice to see you, Scott.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair Brumley, members of the board, Superintendent Hawker. I have just a brief update for you. We recently met with the Coeur d'Alene Public Library staff and several members of the library board to kind of just take a fresh look at our partnership and our collaboration in the district. And this included a site visit to the satellite library at Lake City High School, as well as a tour of the library at our new NEXA, Northwest Expedition Academy on Prairie, where we are currently contemplating a possible collaboration with the public library. The branch library at Lake City High School was established in early 2016, and it operated for 4 years there until it was suspended in March 2020, or at least access was suspended at the onset of the pandemic. And as you know, the school library remained open to students but closed to the public through last school year. And I think that really gave us and the team at Coeur d'Alene Public Library an opportunity to reflect on whether that satellite library program was working well for all concerned in meeting the needs of the community. So as we shared with you in your packet this evening, the library board has voted to discontinue the satellite library at Lake City High School. The board concluded that while really it was a great concept to try it out, it did not really seem to have kind of that broad community appeal that we were all kind of hoping it would have at the onset of that program. So additionally, they believe that it would be at this point really difficult to sort of try to regain the momentum for the branch library following such a long closure there of nearly 18 months now. So either party may terminate our MOU agreement with 60 days notice, and so we have received that notice from the library. I believe we received that on July 1st. And the Lake City High School Satellite Library agreement then would be terminated by the end of August. We are prepared, of course, to communicate this to district families and our wider community. The library will need to collect its materials that have been left at Lake City. We also will then come up with a plan for removing the branch library signs on campus. There's quite a large one there in front of the school along Ramsey Road, and then I believe there's some additional signage on the school building or right inside the entrance. At the same time, we have had some promising preliminary discussions with the public library team about the potential for a partnership in support of the students at Nexa. I don't want to get ahead of those discussions. We're in the very early stages. I will say that everyone's excited about potentially what could be provided there. And to explore that further, we are setting up a meeting between the library, the city library staff, and the team at Nexa in the next few weeks. We have Michael Priest with us this evening, the director of the Coeur d'Alene Public Library. He is here to help answer any questions that you may have, and I will try to help as well. I've been involved in most of these recent discussions.
Thank you, Scott. I guess the one maybe clarification or maybe a comment you could allow for is we designed Nexa with some outside access, and how does that help with this potential of having the public library there?
Correct. Yeah, Nexa was designed, or the design was changed sort of late in the process to accommodate the potential for an after-hours library where the public could access the library at the school through a separate entrance from the front entrance or the main entrance. This is actually the access that is used by City Parks and Rec for some evening programs in the gym at Nexa. It would be the same access point. The library is essentially right across the hallway from the gymnasium, so they both use the same. And yeah, we've talked about that already with the library, that maybe down the road, and I don't think this is probably where we're going to try to start, but maybe down the road we could explore the potential to have public access after hours, possibly on the weekends, or even during the summer or during breaks, where the public could enter, use the library, and wouldn't necessarily then be able to have access to the whole school. They would just be restricted to that area of the building. So that's certainly a possibility, but again, I think our initial discussions are more about how to serve the Nexa students with some public library support right there during the school day.
Yeah, Scott, thank you for the update. It kind of makes sense, the situation at Lake City High School. I think Nexa is a unique opportunity for future potential programs, especially with the location, with all of the building and development around Nexa. In the summer, I can see that being a wonderful opportunity if the library was able to provide summer reading programs there. It was designed to be accessed by the community, and so it's a fantastic library, excuse me, for the community that hasn't had a chance to see it. It's a wonderful facility, and I would love to see it be used if we could develop into some sort of partnership with the library.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And here's Michael, if you have a question.
Michael, right? Correct? Okay. Thank you for being here. Just quick question for you on Lake City. Could you just give maybe a little idea of, other than an 18-month pause, but what was activity like at Lake City? Kind of my anecdotal understanding is that it was fairly popular with students, but perhaps we didn't have a lot of community members coming in there.
That's a fair assessment, okay. Yeah. It peaked around 2018 in terms of usage from the public, and it was dipping a little bit, and then the pandemic hit. It never quite hit the numbers we were hoping for, unfortunately.
Yeah, it seemed like we got that going, and then there was remodel at Lake City, I think twice during 2 summers, right? And
there were some obstacles.
Yeah, right.
Multiple factors.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for coming this evening and listening to our board meeting and being available for questions. And thank you to you, Scott, as well, for presenting today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, next we have the K-5 open enrollment policy for 2021-22 school year. Is that you, Dr. Hawker?
We're going to let Lynn take that one.
This was at the request of our legal counsel, Megan O'Dowd. She reminded me that, as you can see in policy 3010, open enrollment, part of that policy states, as permitted by Idaho Code, the board by resolution may close open enrollment at any time, but the board will revisit such resolutions in the fall of each year. So Going back to 2016, there was a K-5 moratorium and put in place for any new out-of-district students at that time. We've not addressed it since that time. And so to keep us in alignment with policy, literally we need to just decide if any action or any attention needs to be paid to that current directive.
Okay, thank you, Lynn.
Ms. Town, so if it's to stay in place, then no action is needed, is that correct?
Correct.
And to repeal it, then you'd make a motion to
Correct.
remove it? Okay.
Yes.
I would be in support of keeping this open enrollment moratorium going. You know, I think it's worth discussion, you know, for where we were in 2016. You know, we were very tight on space at elementary at the time, and we had secondary space, and we've kind of flip-flopped as our communities changed. So I think, you know, going into this school year, as we are looking for workshop topics and those sorts of things, maybe this would be a good one to squeeze in there at some point, is just looking at our enrollment, because you know, now we probably have some room at elementary, potentially. I mean, with full day K, I know that's squeezing some of our classrooms, but it's probably worthy of the discussion. And I know not a lot of out-of-district enrollment, open enrollment's happening at the secondary level, because I think there's a capacity clause in there anyways. If we're over 95%, then those are denied or can be denied. So that'd be my thoughts, that we keep it going and review this school year in a workshop.
Yeah, I echo those same thoughts. I do think, however, we need to see some enrollment numbers. I know our elementary projections have been down, and when we were doing our long-range planning work several years in the past, I think it's important that we reevaluate that data and maybe get some new projections. With the increasing price of homes in our city limits, we may see elementary numbers go down, and maybe something that is in our best interest to open up our boundary again. So I would like to see this done sooner rather than later, and look at some new projections and see if we're still on the trajectory that we had planned for, and if not, then maybe, like Trustee Morrishow said, we float it out to the community and do some workshopping on it and further discuss it.
And if I remember, I think we maybe even moved that kind of topic to long-range planning for the fall, just to begin to look at numbers and projections.
And I had the same questions, Dr. Hawker. Was curious about, what are our projected enrollment numbers. I think it'd be good to have us looking at that in October or November. I think if we aren't filling our elementary schools and we have kids that want to be in those seats, then we should be, I think there's two sides to that. So I would definitely want to evaluate, once we know we have seats, whether or not we would be opening them up. So. But I don't hear anybody making any kind of motion tonight. Is that right? Okay, so status quo. Thank you, Ms. Town. And then next we have policies for information, starting with 3500F and 3500F2, mental health and consent. And Ms. West is back up there.
Good evening. I think I foreshadowed this conversation a little bit in the counseling update. So we have a current policy, 3500F. We're asking proposing just some small changes. Currently that policy, so 3500F, is specific to mental health, school-based services, and the consent for those services. As it's currently written, it names Heritage as our sole partner because of the demands that I spoke to previously of Heritage Health in our community and the need for us to be responsive and provide services to students. We would like to change this to leave it as a blank space that could be filled in so that we can partner with more than one agency. It will allow us to increase services and availability for students. So that's 3500F. We also would ask to strike grades 9 through 12, allowing this consent form to be the single consent K through 12. And then that deletion of F2 is just the K5. So we don't really need two consent forms. This would be the single universal consent K through 12.
And these will be out for 30-day review, right? And back at September for action. Okay. No questions?
I just had sorry, Andy. You thought you were
So
going to get to
close.
leave. I just wondered, do you know why we had two different consent forms and where that came from? I just was curious if there had been purpose behind it.
So this is before, I think the origination of this policy was prior to my employment. My understanding is that this policy is also built into the school-based health services or school-based health center, which was our proposal to provide medical access for secondary students. And so that's actually what 3500 F1 is specific to. And prior to that, we had been providing the option for students and their parents and legal guardians to consent to mental health services for K-5. And so my belief as to why there are two policies was just that we added 912 as an option. And so we kept the K through 5, added 912. Our hope is to expand also into middle school if that becomes available this year and families and students wish to participate in these services and consent to them. So removing the 912 and having a universal consent just allows us to serve students K through 12.
Okay.
I could probably give just a little background on it because I think I was on the board then. I think initially we just had a very narrow scope on it, and I believe it was Lakes Middle School was initially the site that was approved for this service. The provider didn't happen in that year, and so it didn't come to fruition. Then it moved to the elementary model, and I believe it was for the downtown schools that were serviced, and it was almost a pilot program, so we kind of put a very narrow scope on it. So it was pilot program. Then I think we added venture at some point, and then the two high schools.
So it sounds like we just need something that covers everybody then.
Yes.
Okay. So this particular policy and the consent form will be out for public comment for the next 30 days, and it'll be back on our board agenda September 14th for action. And then our next policy then is 4105P, which is public participation in board meetings.
Thanks, Chair Brumley. Yes, I would like, no, that's, you don't need to introduce me. That's okay. I would absolutely just like to encourage the board to perhaps reprioritize your time. We certainly all know, as has been brought up today as well, the time it takes to be a board member, and we want to be really sensitive to that. And I think we also have heard that, I've heard in my last meeting, and then obviously tonight as well, to reiterate, I think I would like to do a more targeted opportunity to communicate and create transparency amongst our community with the school board. And so my proposal is to simply modify policy 4105P and ask that we take that policy and by no means eliminate community input at board meetings, but to focus the community input on items that would be on your agenda for that evening, that would be considered part of your even additional 30-day, information and gathering. It would give it'd give your community one more opportunity to make a final input information into something that you might be voting upon later that night. But then to ask the board in this reprioritizing perhaps of your time to consider, you can call them what you'd like, whether they are public forums, whether they are listening tours, whether they are open houses, whatever you'd like to call them. But for us to be able to carefully schedule those opportunities so that we have an opportunity to not only hear from the community, but we have an opportunity to dialogue with the community. Under our current practices at your board meetings, the dialogue is non-existent. It's one-way communication, and there's not a good ample opportunity to help answer the many questions that I have heard from many community members already in my 2 meetings here. We need an opportunity to help answer those questions and to learn more and have those conversations. So again, I just believe that that collaboration is a big important piece, and if the board would entertain modifying this policy. I think it can keep your board meetings perhaps a little more succinct and focused on the agenda items at hand, while in turn creating a targeted strategic opportunity to enhance your collaboration opportunities with your community. And so we could work on scheduling that. Another benefit of that is, in the event we couldn't get a quorum of board members to find an evening to go meet with the community for an hour, that'd be okay. Even if 1 or 2 board members appeared, that'd be great. But many members of your cabinet, as well as your new superintendent, would be there as well to answer questions and to try to create dialogue and create that collaboration that is very much needed, I believe, in order for Coeur d'Alene Public Schools to take the next step and continue to be a great school district.
Yeah, Dr. Hucker, thank you for that idea. I think it's probably something that would enhance dialogue between the community. I do worry, however, until we have something in place, until we're able to schedule our first event, we don't want to limit access to the community for the board to hear their comments. And so I think it is valuable, while it is difficult that we can't respond and we can't give answers or we can't clear up misinformation, we can only listen. I think it's important that we are here to listen, and it is part of our job. And so I'm all for this, but I would like to see something on the books first before we limit access to the board. And so thank you for putting time into this, and let me know what you come up with. And I know this is going to go out for 30 days anyway, so it's not an immediate change, but moving forward, I think it would provide better dialogue between the board and the community, so thank you.
I very much appreciate you bringing this, Dr. Hawker. And I will just speak personally. It's hard to have public comment and not have an opportunity to respond back, to offer, my comments or my sentiments on things. And so I really do look forward to having this opportunity to have dialogue in terms, or as opposed to the one-way communication. And certainly this policy didn't change for this evening. It would not change for the upcoming September 14th meeting. It will be open for 30 days for comment. So if folks don't agree or feel something should be different, please let us know. But we really do need to be able to conduct business. And one-way communication isn't always effective. So I like the idea of having the agenda items be what we talk about, because then when we're getting public comment, then I feel like even though that individual, I can't necessarily respond in a dialogue right then and there, because it's on the agenda, I can reference that comment in some way. I can follow up with those comments in some way that I think will be very helpful in facilitating understanding between the board and the community, and then furthering that through those workshops. So I welcome the idea very much, and I really, really appreciate you bringing that to us. Thank you. Nothing else, anybody? Okay. All right, so that will also be out for comment for the next 30 days as far as 4105P, public participation in board meetings. And that brings us to our last agenda item, which is our equity framework discussion. I was asked, but I also joined in the request to have this put on our agenda tonight so that the board could have some conversation this evening about the commentary we received last month. I can see from public comment, I missed out on the opportunity to hear tonight, but I know that multiple people commented tonight also, I believe, on our equity framework. And so I just want to open it up and give board members an opportunity to maybe comment on what they'd like to see moving forward with the equity framework.
I'll start. I know I was one of the trustees that asked that this be put on here. And I'm going to keep it pretty short because we've been here a long time. But I think for me, obviously, there's been a number of concerns raised tonight, and there were a number of concerns raised last month. And I think it's important that we dive deeper into that work and that we address those or eliminate those and really clarify what work the district needs to work on it. And I guess when I think of equity, I just look at it maybe in a different framework, and maybe it's because I've things like the curriculum audit, that pointed to a couple specific equity issues, and these are education equity issues. But one is Lake City High School having separate graduation requirements than Coeur d'Alene High School. And if you're not familiar with graduation requirements, in state Idaho, you need 46, I believe it's graduation credits At Coeur d'Alene, you take 29 core credits and 17 electives. At Lake City High School, you take 29 core credits and 29 electives. And that elective allows those students access, or it's time, right? And so they can go access additional coursework, whether that's CTE coursework or arts, music, those sorts of things. And if you've had a kid at Coeur d'Alene High, it's a little tougher for those kids to do it, especially if they're on a CTE path or a AP path. So that's just one issue that I see as an equity issue, and we've been talking about it for 2 years now about our high school schedules and trying to get these two school communities to come together on something that has more balance. Another one that was addressed in the curriculum audit was forced transfers. If you don't know what this is, lucky for you, you never had a kid that had this happen to you, but we'll have people show up on the first day of school and say, I'm here, to enroll my student, and we didn't have room at that school. And the prior practice of the district for a number of years was bring them here, we'll put them on a bus, and we'll take them over to this school that does have room. That kiddo lost 20 minutes every morning and every afternoon on a bus going from that school. 40 minutes a day, 5 days a week, it's 200 minutes a week, 36 weeks. It's a lot of instructional time. It was probably, in my opinion, the worst thing this district did, or school districts do, to kids, because oftentimes those were our most struggling students, the ones that showed up on the first day of school that we knew nothing about. They had just moved to town, or they had just, something had happened in their life. So those are the equity issues that I see us addressing, and there's lots of those. And I just think we need a lot more conversation about what it is that we're trying to address, because it's, there's references in there that maybe need to be taken out. But some of it's just guilt by association, in my opinion. And I think we need to clear that up so people don't think we're doing something we're not, or that is not our intention, or that maybe it's not our intention, but it's someone else's intention. And they could use those words and twist them around and run in a different direction with it. So I think it's important. I would recommend that we form a committee, another committee, but, a group, and have citizens on it, have other elected officials, whether it be in city government or whatever, and that we have this discussion and that we narrow the focus of it and make it real clear what it is we're trying to solve and how we're going to solve those issues. I heard someone last month said, it's really not maybe an equity issue, it's an access issue. When you're talking at it in those regards of, those elective type things. And so, I don't know. The world's a lot different now than when we went through this a year ago or a year and a half ago. So that would be my request.
Yeah, I would agree. We've heard a lot of feedback over the last two board meetings, and I think some of the feedback that I'm hearing is maybe a misunderstanding of the word equity. And Trustee Morrisroe mentioned that, equity can be used in different districts in different parts of the country to mean very different things. And one thing I can say from the heart is equity does not mean marginalization of any student. Equity is not about equal outcomes. That's not what this framework intended. And so if nothing else, we can put together a group of community members, and I invite all of you to be part of this committee. And we dig in and we see the work that our staff and our administration is doing to provide access to education to all of our students. And I see some teachers sitting in the audience tonight, and I know how hard they work every year to meet students where they are in their learning process. And so this equity framework is not meant to bring down any one set of students. It's not meant to propel one set of students above the others. It's about the programs that we have, life skills, our ALP program, our special ed program. Those are some pretty awesome programs that I fully support, and they provide equity for our students. And so I'm saddened to see so much distrust of what this board and administration has attempted to do. So I encourage as much feedback, community feedback, input. It's a transparent document, and if there's issues with it, then we should dive into it. And I'm glad that Dr. Hawker is here and he can lead that discussion. But equity framework is not to harm any single student, and I really want to get that message out there. And so I hope that we can move forward and we can discuss it civilly and calmly, and we can look to our staff who are sitting out there. And if you're a parent, ask your teacher what an equity framework means to them. Ask them how in the classroom equity applies to them. Does that mean that a student might need help from a reading specialist 1 month, or a student might need occupational therapy? It's different for every student, and it's not meant to harm any individual student or to hold any child back. I have 3 students myself, and they have all needed different resources at different times in their education career, and we've been in this district for a decade now. And I can say that I am proud of the work this administration has done, that our staff has done, and I encourage our community to dig in and be involved in this. We're not trying to bamboozle anyone. We're not trying to harm students. And I apologize if we didn't do a good enough job getting it out there and getting input. We tried. COVID was difficult. But let's start fresh, and let's get it out into the community, and let's really dig in and see what it means, because it should benefit all of our students.
Dr. Hawker, I'd love to see this be one of the first things that we begin discussing, to be able to give us some time and energy to dialogue more with the community. One of the things that would be important for me is to really lift up what does our equity framework right now address within our audit, because there's some direct lines of things that our audit pointed out that said, if you do this, this is going to strengthen your school district. And some of those is just making sure that no matter what classroom our kids go into across the district, that they're getting the same type of resources. So one school doesn't give kids something and another school gives them something else, but that everybody, to be challenged at one school, they can be challenged at whatever school. And so making sure that all kids get access to what they need. And so I'd love to be able to dialogue more and say that this is the heart and the intent of where we were headed with this. And so, I've heard it say too that maybe we don't want to challenge kids as much, and really this framework allows us to challenge kids, is what I read into it, and to say, oh, kids that want challenge, we're going to challenge all kids. And so let's make sure that everybody gets what they need in order to be a successful student. And so I'd love to see this be something that we can dialogue more with. So.
And I would echo those comments. I would just add that last month I heard someone say that we were taking away opportunity from kids and that we were removing upper level classes or taking away. And for me, I see this on both ends of the spectrum, that what this is bringing is not just challenge and resource to those who need a leg up, but also for those who are already very skilled, who may be bored in the classroom, who may not be being challenged, that it is our obligation to provide resources to them as well, to make sure that we are challenging all spectrums across the board, so that kids just have the best outcome possible. Not that everybody has the same outcome, but that each individual kid has the best outcome. And so, Dr. Hawker, did you have anything you wanted to add or comment on that?
Well, thank you all for your individual comments as well. This will be we'll have an initial conversation on this at your August 16th work session. That will be our kickoff. We'll share out some plans as far as creating this group, if that's your wishes, and be able to have that conversation, because yes, I would echo as well what each of you have said. I think everybody in this room may have a slightly different interpretation of what their definition of equity is, and it's become obviously a very contentious discussion topic. And I think this would be, again, a great opportunity for the school board to collaborate with your community and create some solutions here. So I welcome this as a good opportunity for us for next steps.
Okay, and then not hearing any more comments, that is the last agenda item we had this evening. And so we do have some dates coming up. Dr. Hawker has talked about that, our workshop on August 16th. And then our regular meeting, have I been saying the wrong date all night? Is it September 13th? And I apologize. Please do not come on September 14th. It is September 13th is our regular board meeting due to the Labor Day holiday. Normally, we would be meeting on those first Mondays. And then there's special meetings closed to the public based on personnel on September 9th. That's what that is. And then the September 10th meeting is only scheduled tentatively. It will depend upon what our enrollment numbers look like. So stay tuned. Thank you for everyone's attendance this evening. And with that, we're adjourned.